in some cases, responded with works of astounding beauty and honesty and humanism, particularly somebody like Baldwin, who, was doubly marginalized by being gay and black. And I think also, I started to notice a certain kind of hypocrisy and complacency on the part of a lot of the white kids and their families that I was around. So, I think that pissed me off a little bit, and it was more a desire to, I think, distance myself or be critical in some way of white privilege than a desire to, be black or falling in love with black people or black culture, if that makes sense.
Have you seen white people or Jews fall in love with blacks or black culture?
Have I personally seen that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard. I think that I don't tend to ascribe, I don't tend to spend too much time sort of ascribing motives to people for what they do. I've certainly seen, within the world of hip-hop, there's plenty of white people, and there's a predominant portion of them who are Jewish. I think partly because hip-hop is a New York-based form, and I think partly for certain, I think there's certain historical resonances between blacks and Jews that, I try to explore in this book and that I've seen in person. I can't, I think that, the people that I'm personally friends with who are sort of white and involved in some way in hip-hop or in black culture tend to have traveled a somewhat similar path where some form of black music, and in this generation it's going to be generally hip-hop, made them aware and critical of certain elements of what it meant to be white in this country. So I think it's more of a critical response to whiteness than a sort of out-and-out falling in love with blackness. I think that in this country there's an enormous sense of voyeurism, particularly around hip-hop and the fetishization of black bodies. So I think on a larger level, there's been a real split in this country in terms of where privilege is located. Traditional forms of privilege, economic privilege, pretty much resides where it always has. But cultural privilege, cultural capital, has increasingly been associated with blackness. So there's a real confusion for a lot of young white kids in particular because they don't understand that, they're still at the center because they turn on the TV and all of the most glamorous, flashy, conspicuous wealth they see is in rap videos. So they actually end up feeling like they don't have a cultural identity and like they've been marginalized and that black people are at the center of the universe. So there's like a combination of desire and resentment that I see a lot when I talk to some of these kids. Am I like anywhere near you?
Yeah. I'm just curious. This is like all good stuff to ask and answer. So I'm just feeling my way here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you understand. What year did you graduate high school?
94.
Okay. What did Jews and blacks have in common in America?
I think that a number of things. I think that, both groups are dealing with these sort of after effects of diaspora, of sort of a forced diaspora, whether in the case of blacks, the legacy and the horrors of slavery, in the case of Jews, the kind of repeated banishments from all these different countries in Europe. So both groups come to America under a kind of duress that is, I think, unique. And I think that in both cases there's a sense that, unlike some other groups, identity is a really kind of a multifaceted and complicated thing. That there are sort of wide margins in both communities. For Jews, I think it's this conflation of ethnicity, religion, culture, history. It's like there's many ways to feel Jewish and also many ways to feel marginal and pushed away from, the sort of the core or whatever that is of the Jewish community. So you got Jews who say shit like, well, I'm Jewish, but I'm Buddhist, or people who connect ethnically but not religiously. So I think there's sort of a sense of double consciousness, a sense of being part of a community but also distant or alienated from it for a lot of Jews, and I think the same is true for blacks. There's an essentialization of what it means to be black, and it's an identity that doesn't fit for a lot of people. And there's also the double consciousness inherent to black life in America where, as Du Bois talked about, you are aware of both yourself and the other. You're unseen in the white world, and you're able to gain this certain kind of perspective on it. So I think that, those are some of the sort of root causes of a similarity, of a resonance between blacks and Jews. And then on a more practical level, I think there's been, certainly a sort of progressive alliance, a civil rights alliance, a lot of history of really interesting sort of artistic interplay, whether it is, jazz in the 20s, where, Fletcher Henderson is writing all the arrangements for Benny Goodman's band, or, the worldwide perception even of jazz as, like in the 30s, the Duke Ellington band got pulled off a train in Germany and harassed by all these Nazi soldiers, and they kept calling jazz nigger Jew music. So, there's that sort of thing, up to the ways that writers, there are great letters between Ellison and Bellow in the 50s. And, some of the stuff that Bernard Malamud had to say about wanting to be seen as, a writer, not a Jewish writer, wanting to be allowed to speak sort of universally instead of for his own marginalized group, it's identical almost to the stuff Frederick Douglass was saying, 80 years earlier. And then, all the way up to the sort of breakdown of that civil rights alliance in the 80s. And, it's been a subject of conversation even in this presidential race, with Obama, talking about how he wants to repair relations in the black and Jewish communities, being asked to distance himself from Louis Farrakhan, all of these kind of things. So I think it's a really kind of a rich and interesting history that has been really collaborative at points and has been very tense and fraught at others, particularly in the 80s. These comments that people like Farrakhan, Jackson, Sharpton made have been, I think, have been sort of frozen in amber by the older Jewish generation as reason for a pullback financially, emotionally, practically from the civil rights alliance of the 60s. And I think it's got to do with sort of Jewish assimilation, a desire to change bedfellows. So these comments have sort of been, like if you ask like, a room full of Jewish people over the age of 50, be like, Jesse Jackson, they'll all be like, oh, well, he called New York Hymietown in 1983. It's like, well, what has he done since then? Anything? But I think these moments get, I'm sort of more disturbed by the fact that Jesse Jackson calling New York Hymietown in 1983 is so fixed and central to the Jewish memory than the fact that he said it, because I think it implies a lot of things that I'm not too happy about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I hear every word. Do you think American Jews are more likely or less likely than the average white person to have instinctive negative reactions to blacks?
I have no idea. I don't think I know enough of either population. I've spent most of my life on the West Coast and the East Coast, in places that are, gonna vote heavily in the blue column, and it's hard for me to make an assumption. I would like to be able to say that Jews have more progressive attitudes, but I don't know that it's the case. Certainly that was an issue in this election too, and the New York Times did a really good job of going to Florida and finding Jews who were horrifyingly racist and saying ridiculous things. I'd like to think that that's out of the mainstream, but it's hard for me to tell. I think it's really more of a generational thing than anything else. But I don't know how to answer that. I don't know what the answer is.
Mm-hmm. Incidentally, kind of apropos of nothing, but do you think that Barack Obama